and welcome back to BookTube with Amy. Today is going to be my most recent weekly wrap up, although technically this is 2 weeks worth of reading because I've been off work and I was going to have my haul last week be like an additional video on the Wednesday or Thursday or something, and then have a wrap up on the Saturday, but I was just enjoying spending my time with Simon and I didn't want to take myself away from that so that I could get a wrap up filmed and edited and scheduled. So you had my haul on Saturday and then this is just going to be a wee bit of a longer wrap up than usual. So get a cuppa and just come and hang out with me while we chat about some really great books. So I am obviously Team Scarlet Witch and I'm still taking part in Marvelathon, and so for every book I talk about I'll put up my wee tracker of how many points that managed to get me for my team. When I'm talking about the books, I will try to remember what prompts I've used them for, but obviously we're trying to get like the most points as possible for our team, so we are using books for a fair few prompts, but I will try and mention a couple of them. So first up was Altogether Dead by Charlaine Harris. I read this as part of my Out of the Coffin read along hosted by me and Ange from Angie's Book Chatter. So I didn't want to say too much about this because we're obviously going to have the live show as always, but I just want to say that the 2 books that we've read in June have been 2 of my favourites so far in the series. Altogether Dead and the one that we read at the beginning of the month, which name has totally escaped me, have definitely been my 2 favourites so far because it really delves a lot into the vampire politics and the vampire hierarchy, and I just really love that. It's one of my favourite things in real life is politics, so when that is involved in books, even if it's a fantasy book, that is all my type of jam. So I thoroughly enjoyed this and I just thought that it was brilliant. I'm still really loving the world, I'm still really loving the characters, and I'm just having such a great time rereading these books. So this is a 5-star for me. No shock, no shock. They have all been 5 stars so far for me. I used this as a poll pick prompt and female protagonist, LGBT rep. Can't remember what else. Maybe 5-star prediction because obviously. But my wee tracking over there anyway. And then this is something that I haven't logged for Marvelathon, but we've been reading the Suki Stackhouse short stories as well. Now I got a bit of a tail and a half because I'm hosting the read along and I wasn't reading the short stories when I was meant to be reading them. I was just going to wait and read all the short stories at the end. I'm terrible, right, for if a book series has main books and then short stories or novellas that I just totally blank them, and I just tend to read the main books because I feel like if you're a good author then everything that you should need to know should already be in the main books and you shouldn't bank on people reading the short stories or the novellas. So then I feel like I'm not really missing much by no reading them, and so then there's no point, and like I'm terrible for finishing a series anyway, so if you're telling me I need to go and read all these wee individual short stories before I can finish a series, like that just isn't going to happen. But I'm so glad that I am reading these, so I was just going to wait and read these at the end. Ange bought me this beautiful bind up with all the short stories for Christmas and I didn't pick it up. So up until now, at the end of Altogether Dead, I should have read 4 short stories. So I read the first 4 short stories in this collection and they were actually brilliant. Like I have really enjoyed all of them, and I will definitely continue to go and read them in order because I feel like I will get more out of the series if I read these in order. So I've done a total 360 to be honest on my short story stance. But they're brilliant, and Charlaine Harris does a really great job of, if it's maybe been like quite a heavy serious book, in making the short story feel really light and lovely and like you're just hanging out with some of your pals and having a bit of a joke and a laugh. Or if the main novel has maybe had like a lot of political talk in it and like going through a lot of the hierarchy, there'll be stuff in the short story that'll just mirror that a wee bit to really help it embed and make sense for you. and they're absolutely brilliant. As always, I love Charlene Harris's writing, so this isn't a surprise, but every short story I have read so far has been a 5-star. I haven't logged any of these for Marvelathon for points, because I'm obviously going to be reading them like as we go through the series, so I didn't want to log like half a book, I guess. But I have been enjoying these, and I will definitely be reading them in order. And I think that what me and Ange will get a wee bit better on the live show is saying not only the next book that we need to read, but if there's a short story that we need to read after that as well, putting that in there so that everybody knows sort of what we're supposed to be reading for if they want to follow us along with that as well. And then I read The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. So this has been on my radar like pretty much since I started my BookTube channel. I don't remember who it was who was talking about it, but I just thought that it looked absolutely stunning and sort of right up my street. It seemed like a fantasy, but a wee bit of a darker, grittier edge. We basically have our main character Rin, and she's a gravedigger, and she lives in this wee town, and round about this town, anybody who dies comes back to life as a bone house, and it is basically like a bit of a zombie. And she, as the town's gravedigger, is responsible for making sure that none of the bone houses get into the town and none of the bone houses hurt anybody. But she's getting a wee bit overrun and there's some issues with her family as well, which makes her want to go on a wee bit of a mission to see if she can stop the bone houses forever, and she feels that this might be quite a lucrative endeavour. We also then meet Elias, who is our counterpart, and he and Rin just form a really unlikely friendship, and I think that they are absolutely brilliant. Ellis, he suffers from chronic pain, and that is something that is spoken about a lot through this book. I don't know if Emily Lloyd Jones herself suffers from chronic pain, so I don't know if this is Own Voices representation, but I felt like it was handled really well. I'm obviously not a chronic pain sufferer, so I can't talk about it you know, in a huge amount of detail, but I felt like the rep was really well done. I feel like the author really got across like how much everyday things can be a struggle, and you know, when you're in this big fantasy world and you're expected to fight, and you know, you're in situations where big mad zombies are coming to get you and you suffer from chronic pain, so like even walking up the stairs is a bit of a chore. How are you going to fight them off? I felt like it was done really well, and I just thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was brilliant. You had so many amazing plot points that were happening, and like the book wasn't shy of a twist or a turn, but also the character development was just phenomenal to me. I really loved our two main characters. I really loved Rin's brother and sister, who we also get to meet, and it was just brilliant. I can't describe it to you well enough to make you want to read the book. I promise you I can't, but it was just fantastic. And there's so many times through this book, right, where like you are just in the depths of despair and everything has gone wrong, you can't see a way out, and you know, our main characters are up shit creek without a paddle, to put it politely, and you still just have so much hope for them. There was parts of this book that made me really quite emotional, and I really shipped our two main characters. I wanted them to get together. Like anytime they would have a wee moment, my wee heart was just like singing for them. I was like, yes, come on. And it was just phenomenally written. I was so invested. They added this part audio, part physically, and the audiobook was phenomenal as well. Whoever it was, I'll put their name in, who narrated the audiobook, was just fantastic. But I hung on every single word of this book, and like, see, when I read a book, see, sometimes I'm like, oh, I hope that happens, or like, oh, I would like if the story went there. But see, with this one, like, I was so invested, like to the point where I was nearly in tears, like, this better happen, Simon, and see if this doesn't happen. And he was like, calm down, doll, it's a book. But it was just, it was so good. It was so hopeful, it was dark, it was gritty, twisty, turny, brilliant plot, phenomenal character development, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think I used this as a 5-star prediction. I used it for Heartbreak for my team prompt, and I used it as disability rep because Ellis has chronic pain. I can't remember what else. I don't know if I said, but Bone Houses was a 5-star read for me. Sorry, I have forgotten how to booktube. God, I skip a wrap up for 1 week and I didn't know how I do things anymore. And then next up I read The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I loved it. I was a bit apprehensive going into this book because firstly, she's chonky, but also I've heard quite a lot of people reviewing this, and while it gets brilliant reviews, people love it. A lot of people have said that the writing is quite flowery and it can be quite slow, and we all know that there are things that instantly turns me off for a book. I say it 1,000 times, and like, if I ever get big enough to make merch, my merch will say instant gratification reader, because like, boy, I can't be dealing with flowery slowness, right? Like, I just want you to tell me what is happening right now. So I was a wee bit worried going into it that it would be that slow or that it would be that flowery, that I wouldn't really gel with it. I'm a very character driven reader, and so I feel like when there's a lot of flowery writing used and the author is spending so much time describing your setting or particular scenes, and they've really put a focus on that into their writing, as much as I can respect that, and I know that so many people love that, for me it makes it harder for me to connect with their characters, because I often find that I've spent a lot more time describing the setting and, you know, writing beautiful lovely prose than they have focused on their characters. And as a character driven reader, that is like my worst nightmare. So I was a wee bit nervous going into this, but it was fantastic. So we have our 3 sisters and they all live very different lives. They haven't really been around each other, spoken to each other since their childhood. And now, all of a sudden, as grown women, they have all been pulled together into the same place at the same time. And it's all wrapped up in, you know, trying to get women the vote. They are suffragettes, they are witches, and magic has disappeared, and the 3 of them are working together to try and get magic back. This was everything I ever wanted in a book, let me tell you. It was brilliant. Our 3 sisters are phenomenal. They all have such distinct personalities, worldviews and voices that it wasn't confusing at any point as to who was who. In the very, very beginning, I felt it was, before we really got to know them, because they all have 2 names. They have like their given name, and then they have what they refer to as their mother's name. And so one name is like their day-to-day name, and their other name is like their magical name that maybe only other sisters in their coven would refer to each other as. And so in the beginning, because everybody was referring to people as different names, I was a wee bit like, hold on, what? Who's what? What's going on? But after we started then getting the other sisters' perspectives, it was brilliant, and it became very clear, and the characters were very well developed. I tend to find with books that have several siblings, sometimes, especially if they're sisters, then all their personalities can sort of just muddy together because they've had a similar upbringing, similar experiences, and it's really difficult to maybe have as distinct personalities as what Alex E. Harrow managed to achieve in this book. They were all very clearly different women, and I loved that we got to find out so much about their individual lives as well as their lives together as sisters, and there was such an interesting family dynamic here. I was a wee bit frustrated in the beginning because it was sort of hinting at stuff that had happened in the past and obviously why they weren't close anymore, and I was like, oh my god, like I hope it's not dragged out to the very end of the book because instant gratification reader. So Thankfully it wasn't, and as soon as we sort of split off into our like individual POVs and we were following each of the sisters individually, we sort of found out pretty quickly why the sisters had relationships like that and what had happened in the past. So I was glad that that wasn't dragging on until the end of the book, because it did create such an interesting dynamic. But then what it managed to do was get us on side really, really quickly, so that we knew more than all the sisters did individually, because we were getting it from all three of their points of view. And so as a reader, I was very invested in their reconciliation, and when they had thought a certain thought and had a certain viewpoint, I was like, you're wrong, you don't know, like, talk to your sister. And I was just like itching for them to be back together, which was great. And then the magic system in this book was so interesting as well, and it really dove down to actually what makes a woman a witch, and whether or no it is having knowledge and courage and the power to know your worth more so than magical ability, which I really enjoyed. And there was a lot of interesting conversation in here running about the Salem witch trials, because I don't know if I said, but it was set in Salem. I don't think I did. And so it was a lot of interesting chat in here around the Salem witch trials and what was actually happening with the witch trials and how they originated. And it was just brilliant, right? Like, it was so political and it was so feminist. It was great. And what I really liked in this as well is there wasn't just women sticking up for women, you know, there were male allies who were helping these women throughout it as well. And I feel like when we talk about historical feminist retellings, there are very rarely men who are willing to help, and I feel like obviously there was, and so I really liked that that was included in here as well, and we really got to understand just how much they were putting at risk also, but like they were doing it because they believed that, well, women were equal humans, you know. But it was great, really powerful, really plot heavy, phenomenal character development, utterly heartbreaking, but somehow equally uplifting. And I would recommend this to anybody. Like, if you like witches, you're going to like this book. If you just like books that have a really interesting magic system, then you are going to enjoy this. If you like books that are a bit politically driven, you'll enjoy it. And if you like sort of historical feminist retellings, then you are going to enjoy it. I feel like sometimes books that are, especially historical feminist retellings, like they focus so much on the world and trying to get you to imagine that world, that it tends to focus a wee bit less on the message, and it can be a wee bit less accessible if you didn't read a lot of historical fiction. And I didn't feel like this was the case with this one. I feel like it is just such an easy read, and for it being such a chunky book, I did it in 2 days. Like, it was brilliant, and I could not put it down. Please read it. It was brilliant. It was a 5-star read for me. It was just phenomenal, and these characters and their story I think will live in my heart for quite a while. I was very emotional while I was reading this book. It just gave me everything I needed. Everything I needed. It gave me the emotional hit, and it was just very powerful. And I read it, please. Then lastly, I read The Devil's Staircase by Helen Fitzgerald. Now, this was no a 5-star. This book was a 1-star for me, and if it wasn't as short as it was, I probably would have just DNF'd it, but I powered through so I could get the points for my team. I was reading some reviews of this as well, and people were saying that the first part of the book is basically mince, but the second part of the book, like, it really amps up and it makes it worth sort of the slog of the first part of the book. So I was like, well, like, if I'm going to get some dark and twisty stuff in the second half of the book, then I will maybe persevere. So we have our main character, and she is potentially going to have Huntington's. So her mum died very young for Huntington's. It's obviously genetic. Her sister's had the test and she is negative for it. She doesn't have the gene, and so she is fairly confident that she is going to have it. On the day that she goes to get her test to find out whether or not she has the Huntington's gene, she decides that she doesn't want to live her life waiting to know whether she has this disease or no. And so she leaves Australia right after the doctor's appointment and does a bunk. She basically leaves a note for her dad and her sister saying like, I'm going travelling, catches, I need to start living my life. And she ends up backpacking and in London with a group of other backpackers. No all is as it seems once they move into a house that they decide to squat in, and there seems to be some horrible smells and noises coming from the basement, and they discover that a woman has been kidnapped and held in the basement of their squat, and so they are all sort of under suspicion as to who is the kidnapper. This book was very, very weird to me. I feel like it was sort of 2 books, right? The first half of the book I felt was very juvenile. So we have our main character, and I appreciate that she has sort of not really lived much of a life, because she was basically waiting to find out whether or not she's going to die. So she's never drank, done drugs, had sex, things like that. And so when she is away from her family and she decides that she is going to live her life, like that is very much what she has decided she wants to do. And so she's with this group of backpackers and they're basically just drinking, having drugs, having a great time. But there is like so much drug chat that it came off as really immature. Like, and I get obviously she's young, but I still felt like it was super immature. Like, there was just no need for that. Like, it's quite a short book, and the amount of times that she spoke about smoking weed or a spliff or ganja, blah blah blah, like taking a line, doing the eckies, like there was just no need for it, and it just came off as very immature. Now, I've read a lot of books that have been about substance abuse in a negative or positive light, you know, and they didn't come off as immature as this book did. I feel like Helen Fitzgerald has never been to a party in the UK and decided to write what she felt a party in the UK should have been like, and she missed the mark. So it just came off as very immature. And then the subject of sex I felt was handled really weird in this book. So our main character is a virgin, she has never had sex. She meets a guy and she's sort of dating him-ish, and she decides that she wants to give her virginity to him. However, he's like a bit of a player and he basically doesn't want to take her virginity and then for her to like fall madly in love with him, because he just doesn't want to have to deal with the drama, and so he constantly refuses to sleep with her. To which she takes great offence, and she on several occasions is just like strutting about in the squat naked and, you know, constantly trying to throw herself at the other guys, and the other guys are like, you're steaming, like let's know, sit down, get you a cuppa, kind like it'll be fine. And then like that makes it worse because she ends up spiralling and being like, why am I ugly, and like all that sort of stuff, and they're like, no, but you're like, but you're pissed, so don't you want to, you know. And then randomly she just ends up having sex with one of them because like he gets raging at her for trying to like throw herself at somebody else in their friendship group, and she's like, I didn't know why you're angry, and he's like, cause I love you, and she's like, well, I love you too, and then like they end up sleeping together. But I felt like it came like proper out of left field, and I didn't really ship their romance in any real way, because like she's been with this other guy the entire time, right? So it was a bit weird. And then like after that sort of out the way, and you know, like she's with her man, that's fine, it moves on to the second part of the book, and so I'm like, yes, like I'm in for something a wee bit twisted, quite gruesome, and the book just doesn't deliver. It also shifts, so we are getting it from like first person perspective, and then it shifts to third person perspective, like because obviously we are the like kidnappery person looking in. it just was very abrupt and it pulled me out of the story. Like, I didn't feel like that needed to happen. I feel like you could have still done it first person from like the kidnapper's perspective, and like we still would have got that we weren't our main character anymore. So it was weird. And then also like the point of the kidnap is that he's kidnapped this woman because he wants to rape her, and there aren't scenes of graphic rape in here. Like, again, it's written so juvenile, like, and I'm not saying like I wanted it to be a dead like gratuitous rape scenes, but it's just very weird. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but like it is written like in a non-sexual way almost. Like, if such a thing as platonic rape exists, like this book is written like that. And like there are scenes as well where like whoever has kidnapped this lady, like he's no raping her, but like he's touching himself and like licking her feet and stuff like that, which is weird. But like instead of saying like he's touching himself or anything that like makes it sound remotely like a sexual act, like the author will say like, oh, pulling himself, or like and it's like, well, what's he pulling? Like, is he pulling his ear? Like, does he have a wee itch? Like, so it just felt like that weird to me that like in the previous chapters you were really comfortable with like a lassie walking about with her tits out, and like her best friend also gives her like random sex tips just off the cuff, like, and you're fine with that. But then this guy has kidnapped somebody and is raping them, but like you didn't want to use actual any terms to describe that rape. Like, it felt dead weird to me. Like, I just didn't know what was happening. It just didn't really make a lot of sense, if you know, like, if you get my drift. So anyway, and then we're sort of pulled into like a murder mystery within the last like 20 pages of the book, because not only, sorry, I'm spoiling this royally, but didn't read it because it was pish. So in the basement where they found this woman, they also found another 2 bodies, and so like all the people for this squat get arrested, and then like they're basically knocked down one by one. And so one of the women who was found is one of the guy's sisters, so they're like, right, well, it wasn't him, so he's out of the running. And then one of the other lassies, like, I can't remember, but like she was for somewhere else, she's not had any criminal record, like was very upset about the full thing, so they were like, alright, well, it wasn't her. And then like it just keeps going like that. They find like a tiny wee reason as to why it wasn't somebody, and so then you're left down to like a couple of people, and they decide that it is one person, and like that I think it's supposed to be a wee bit of a twist, but I was like, well, it's obviously no that person. So like I was like, I don't believe that it is. And then there's obviously the secondary twist there, not really being that person and it being somebody else. But here's the thing, right? They gear it towards being this person, which I never bought into. And so then I'm like, right, it's clearly this other person then, which like would make more sense and would have been a far more interesting twist. But they don't make it that person, they make it some random other person for this friendship group who's maybe had like 2 minutes a page time the entire book. So like, fine, it was a twist I wasn't expecting, but I also don't really know this character, so why do I give a fuck? Like, weird. So I didn't care about the reveal. And then like they just have it end on such a weird note. Like, the lady who was kidnapped and raped initially gets re-kidnapped for the hospital by the guy who's the actual killer, and then he takes them to like his place of work, and then our like main character, she texts this guy and she's very upset because it's like her new supposed boyfriend who is meant to be the killer, so she's like, can we hang out? And he's like, aye, fine, we're here. So she goes there, and then like he tries to like, he doesn't even rape her main character, like he just touches himself whilst being in the same room as her, and she's like, oh, like I might die, and like he might kill me, like, and if he doesn't kill me then he's going to kill the other woman that he re-kidnapped for the hospital because she got away. So she like locks them both in this room, and like I didn't really know what she does, if she releases some sort of like poison or something. Like it was just very weird. And so she dies so that basically this other woman can live. And then like her boyfriend comes out at the end and he's like, oh, it wasn't me, and the police know it wasn't me, and like then she just dies in his arms. Like, and to be honest with you, could not have gave less of a fuck if I tried. I just did not care, really did not care. I had no emotional pull to anybody. I didn't care about a single character in this book, and it was so shittily written that I will never pick up another book by Helen Fitzgerald again. So this was a 1 star for me, and I am just going to unhaul it straight away because it was terrible, to be honest. Sorry that that was such a long one, but it is what it is, you know. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hopefully you're enjoying everything that you are reading at the moment, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!